Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rainbow Space Magic Con 2.0. This is the Humor and Cynicism panel. Let's introduce our panelists. Tell me who you are, what do you write, and what kind of sci-fi or fantasy humor do you like to read? So we'll start with Chrissy.
Okay. Hello.
You were first on my list.
Go. What a way to wake up. Okay. I'm sorry. I had to fish my cat out of the toilet, so I've had a morning.
Would you like to go?
No, I'm okay. I'm Christine Wright, and let's see, I write basically space opera kind of stuff. And yeah, seems like all my books have a little bit of at least sarcasm, if not some little witty little things in them. But yeah, that's what I write. Sci-fi mostly. What do I like to read? Yeah, I like to read fantasy and sci-fi mostly.
All right, Maz.
Hello, I'm Maz. I write MM romance primarily, but and mostly paranormal romance. So I'm really big into shifters and things like that. I have two series which are both ridiculous, and this is why I wanted to be in this panel so bad. I read about like dinosaur shifters and centaur cowboys and things like that. So of course it has to be like as funny as I possibly can make it, because how the hell could you possibly keep that serious? And I like to read very similar things. Like I love LGBTQ romances primarily, but anything that can make me gut laugh is my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Angel.
Hi, I'm Angel Martinez. I write queer science fiction and fantasy, a little bit of paranormal on the side. I do like to write humor. Some of my stuff is humorous, some of it is deadly serious, so you kind of have to read the blurbs and figure out what's what. For reading, I like to read a lot of different things. For humor, I think probably I have really specific likes and dislikes. I like things that are a little bit strange. So things like dinosaur shifters, that kind of pushes the right buttons.
Very cool. And I'm Valerie Mikles. I will be your moderator today. I write science fiction, mostly space opera, thriller type things. My one foray into humor was I wrote a murder mystery comedy for my local community theater about clones in outer space, because I figured I wanted to see a play with aliens in it. So I wrote it.
Write what you want to read, you know.
And but I'm fascinated by humor because it always catches me off guard, and I find it difficult to write because I think the writers of it are so clever. And yeah, so I really like things that have like sarcasm and wit, and then you just hold a mirror up to yourself and you're like, you know, you laugh at something you would normally cry about. So or you just laugh at something, it's like, oh yeah, that is so relatable. I didn't realize everybody else went through that too. So for the attendees, just a disclaimer, some of the books and stories we'll talk about today, we're trying to talk about sci-fi humor, but they might not all be queer centric. We can branch out to anything that we think is funny. So let's start with some types of comedy and how they're being used in sci-fi fantasy. So we talked offline about satire, farce, absurdist, and slapstick. And are there books that you've read that really hit these types of humor very well, like one of them very well? And what other types are there, and how are they being used well? Should I call it?
There are, of course, a lot of elements in humor and different kinds of humor. Just as an example, if we look at A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, this is a story that it's not queer centric, but T. Kingfisher writes a lot of queer characters, so I didn't feel bad including her. But there's a lot of physical humor, as you can probably tell by the title. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking involves things like a sentient sourdough that lives in the basement and eats things, and occasionally people who go down there. So there's a lot of physical humor involved. And that's that kind of really strange physical humor that just tickles me to death.
That's hilarious. I swear my sourdough is probably in the same state. Might eat people. I don't know. It lives in a bucket, so I don't know. I'm afraid to look now. So.
Oh dear.
It breathes. I mean, have you ever seen sourdough?
It does. Yeah, and I think that's probably why it was so funny, because we can all relate to this sourdough that seems like it's going to come alive and eat Chicago. So yeah.
I'm pretty sure that is mine. Oh man. Now I'm afraid to look.
Chrissy, did you have any ideas?
I have seen quite a few. Oh gosh, I've read quite a few newer authors to me. I've been reading a lot of young adults. I'm trying to see what's out there for the younger generation coming up. There's, oh gosh, I have to grab their names really quickly, but there's one young man that he's Indian, and he writes about being from India, queer and from India, which is, very unusual, actually. You don't read very many Asian folks, and I'm part Asian, so I was looking for that, and just representation is really important to me, so that's what I've been reading. I have to grab his name, but yeah, it's similar things, like just the absurdity of life. It's just like you're walking around like, if my cat fell in the toilet, okay? I mean, it's just like the weirdest stuff happens in life anyway. And I think that a lot of authors love to just stick that situation into a book. You've got to share those moments. You've got to share that lovely sourdough thing happening.
Are you going to be putting somebody's cat in a toilet anytime
I
soon?
probably will, because I do have a contemporary romance, and the dumbest things happen to this young man that are not supposed to happen. And he's in an age gap relationship, and so the older gentleman's kind of taking care of him, and so he's trying to stay out of trouble, but he always ends up in trouble. And they have a cat, so I can imagine the cat falling into the toilet.
Absolutely.
So really absurd things happen in normal life anyway. So I'm seeing a lot of that represented in the younger generation. Oh, everybody is fiction, I guess, but I love reading about that kind of stuff too, because like you said, you can relate to it.
Maz?
I definitely agree with the relatable stuff. Like anytime that you can see yourself reflected back, especially when it's in this larger than life situation, like if they're traveling across the galaxy and somebody runs out of toilet paper and they're like, well, now what are we going to do? That kind of stuff. It's like everybody's been there, but it makes it even more hilarious because of the situation that they're in. I think one of my favorite like fantasy books that was written to be funny, that just like made me howl with laughter, was TJ Klune's Lightning Struck Heart, and just all of the Tales of Verania stuff. Like taking that fantasy concept and flipping it on its head and then dialing it up to 11 with ridiculous, like a very over the top, flamboyantly gay unicorn who just sleeps with everything. Like, how can you not love that? That's fantastic. So I love the more ridiculous, the better. Can really, like, I think it's tough to nail that without being annoying, but like somehow he can do it and just make me laugh. But yeah, it can go either way. I love the relatable stuff, but I also love like, well, I'll never have a talking unicorn, but I would imagine this would be the one I'd be friends with. So
you mean you can write about unicorns without having a unicorn?
Right? It's better if I have one though, because that would be optimal.
That would be better. Yes.
Yeah.
Much better. Yeah.
I was listening to a murder mystery, I guess it was last summer, and there was a cat in it, that was a cyber cat, and it was a witness to the murder, but its memory had been wiped, and the detective just started calling it Chairman Meow. It was just one of those most adorable things. Like, this is hilarious every time you say it, and this is not like, overall the story isn't funny, but this is hilarious every time you say it. So like even little things like that. And I noticed that in a lot of sci-fi thriller where they're trying to be like Firefly, they also are trying to have the wit and the sarcasm in there. And some of them, you know, capture that really well. And some of them are trying so hard. It's like, okay, you're right, you either have it or you don't. So, but don't keep saying, why does nobody appreciate my sarcasm? It's like, let it go, let it go. Let it go. Okay. So
Wait, Scott says we can get a free unicorn if our books hit 100 reviews on Amazon. Ooh,
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm not there yet. So.
Yeah, okay.
Close, but not there.
Is that 100 reviews? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Does that include the ones that Amazon deletes?
Yeah, right.
And we combine them.
Oh, yeah. Well, then I got my unicorn on the way.
Yeah.
If those count double, then that'll be good. All right. There's this misconception that sci-fi fantasy has to be thrilling, dramatic, and serious. And you might have a character that has some dry wit and sarcasm, but what place does straight out comedy and humor have in sci-fi fantasy, and how does it add to the genre? I'll start with Maz this time.
So I'm a big fan of being able to make fun of everything. Like, I think that's a very big part of our culture, at least in American culture, like being able to really point at anything and make it a joke, of course, within reason. But anything that's supposed to be serious, I like kind of dipping it into humor, because I don't think that there are things that have to be serious all the time when it comes to fiction and things like that, or I guess within genres, because especially with sci-fi, that it's perceived as so dry sometimes, especially like a really hard sci-fi. But like, if you give it a chance to be funny, it can be really its own authentic thing. Like, one of my favorite things ever, and I'm sure everybody in this panel and watching this would relate, but Firefly, that's like one of the funniest shows I've ever watched. And that was some deep sci-fi. They're in ships, they're doing sci-fi stuff the entire time. But that entire series cracked me up. Like, every episode had its moments that were really like, I love it, and I connected with the characters, and like I felt so deeply about them that when the really serious stuff hit, it really like punches you in the heart, because an episode, or like earlier in the episode, you were laughing your ass off, you know what I mean? So like, I think it helps you connect with the characters a little bit more if they're really like tickling your funny bone that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I also I listen to a comedy band, and every now and then they'll have that serious song, and you know, sometimes they'll apologize, like, I'm sorry, this song is so serious, it's not what to laugh to. But because you've made me laugh the rest of the time, I'm there with you when that heartfelt moment comes.
Yeah, 100%.
Angel, did you want to?
Oh, sure. I mean, any genre that can't have humor as part of its milieu, it takes itself too seriously. And when something takes itself too seriously, it's very hard to take seriously.
Exactly.
It becomes too self-referential. It becomes too pretentious. It becomes this whole literary exercise in just being serious people. So yeah, having humor in science fiction humanizes it. It makes it, and science fiction should be humanized, because it talks about really important issues in life, and in, you know, what's coming up in the future, and you know, things like environmental impact and social issues and things like that. I mean, that's what science fiction is all about. And if you can't have a human element in there once in a while, that's disastrous. So that's why I think science fiction really needs humor. Someone in the chat mentioned that science fiction wasn't funny until Douglas Adams. I have to disagree, because there were people writing funny science fiction quite a bit before Douglas Adams came on the scene. If you look at, for instance, Keith Laumer's Retief books, he's this secret agent. And he always gets in these really absurd, ridiculous situations, you know, and he befriends bugs on, you know, different planets and things. It's ridiculous stuff, and these are very old. The Retief books were in my middle school library, and I am very old. So yeah, it's been out there for a while. Douglas Adams made science fiction as humor a little bit more popular, but it's always been kind of out there in the background.
Chrissy, do you want to add anything?
Well, you all said it so well. No, there are some writers of science fiction that would just like the horror, you know, that they get if we add any humor to science fiction. They, like you said, they take themselves too seriously. Right. But I mean, there's a place for that, and there's a place for the humor side. And so if you don't want to read something that's space opera and kind of fun adventure, then there are those writers who take it very seriously and they explain the science behind the science fiction. So I'm glad that now there's more out there for everyone, easier reach for everyone. It's not all dry sci-fi. Otherwise, I think it would push the younger generation away from it. And I'm all for let's get books in the hands of kids and younger people. So whatever can help that. And I think that the dry humor and the funny and the slapstick all has a place.
Yeah, when I first figured out I was asexual, you know, it's like I was a writer and I was a sci-fi writer and I wasn't sure how to put it in there. So I wrote a sitcom because I found all these documentaries and all of this serious like autobiographical stuff, and like, but I learned best through entertainment and humor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to create something that was entertaining and humorous. And then also by creating it as a video, like a visual element with multiple people in the cast, it kind of took the loneliness away from it as well, because like everybody involved in this production knows what asexuality is.
Right.
Right.
And, you know, kind of learns that. But
Yay.
But yeah, like there's so much that you can learn if you're in a situation where you can laugh as well. And, you know, like you can choose to take the takeaways or you can choose to not take the takeaways. And, you know, Maz mentioned Firefly, and I remember the situation where Mel woke up married to Saffron, and then Chrissy, you're reading yesterday where the guy wakes up in bed married to an alien. It's like, I don't really understand what's so funny about waking up accidentally married, but apparently it's a very humorous trope.
Well, you know, but it happens in real life. I mean, people in Vegas, you know, wake up and, what is my, I mean, there's that song, right? What is my last name? I don't even know. I got married. Right. And so I'm like, okay, well, that can happen to, you know, gay couples, lesbian couples, it can happen to everybody, right? So, and then all of a sudden I had this character speaking in my head. So
yeah, it was pretty
it helps be slightly crazy to write. But.
Yeah, it was a fun reading. One thing comedy does, we've talked about this before, but one of the uses is to hold a mirror up to the world and laugh at it. And I recently read a book called Billy and the Clonosaurus, which, you know, was not written by me. And the author, in the opening, it's a story about a whole world filled with clones. So everybody just has a number and they're a clone, and then they get slurried and recycled. Okay. And they're all named Will. And but the author painted such a very vivid picture of just the humdrum of routine and how the character, like at the start of the book, gets broken from his routine, and it's just like, no, what do? I mean, I just go home and I warm up my cup of noodles and then I sit here and watch TV. That's what I do, right? Oh, God, and it was one of those things that made me sit there and look at my routine and just kind of shake up my life a little. It was like, I need to stop acting like the clone drone person.
Oh no.
So I was wondering if you've ever read something that made you look at your own life more seriously and then, or kind of changed the way you thought about yourself and the way you do things. It's a thinking question.
It's a thinking question.
You can raise your hand if you have an answer.
I don't think I have a specific answer to that, but with the holding of a mirror to the world, somebody in the chat mentioned Terry Pratchett, and we cannot leave this hour without mentioning Terry Pratchett. It's not science fiction, it's fantasy, but it, you know, it kind of goes along the same lines. And he wrote, it's very funny. His Discworld books are very funny, but they are also really biting satire about how religion very often insists on blind faith, and how governments run and don't run, and about how I love the Unseen University, which with its collection of just really incompetent professors, and it's hilarious what he does, but he's writing satire that is not so far removed that you don't recognize it. So you see all of these things that you see in real life, and you think, oh yeah, that's how it, you know, that's how things are run, and it's terrible. So so yeah, it's funny, but you also sit there and you think, yeah, that's bad.
Or that's just a little too real. I think when our world got kind of dystopic last year, we were looking at that. It's like, that's just a little too close to home.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the crazy funny sci-fi somebody's able to spin 2020 into. Like, this needs to happen.
Oh,
Thought last year was it needs a nice good
I think
humor
we're too
spin-off.
soon right now.
I have
Right.
Yeah, give it a couple years.
Alien Invasion 2020, one of my covers, if you can see it.
Oh, nice.
But last June, I just
lovely.
had all of my readers submit a picture, or not all of them, but it's like, please send me a picture of an alien and I will write a story for it.
Oh,
And, you know, it was just so fun to give them something to do that was artistic, and then to have a prompt, and then I got to write out of it.
That's awesome.
Great.
But yeah, I called it Alien Invasion 2020 because what could make June better?
Right? That's amazing. I love that.
Grab that
And
one.
you know, if somebody wrote 2020 as a novel, they would be panned. They would be torn apart. This is too unrealistic.
Did you? There's a TV show called Mr. Mayor, and in the very first episode, they're talking about how, like, the previous administrator, like, something went wrong with the murder hornets, and it was this whole big thing, and that guy ran away. And it was just like the sidebar comment about murder hornets was like, "Yep, we're in 2020."
That's ridiculous.
Like,
I forgot about the murder hornets.
Right.
But
because
still a thing.
Because the writers lost the plot. I mean, they introduced these murder hornets, and then, you know, something else happened.
Exactly.
And it just
So
disappeared.
I'm like, come on, writers, get it together.
Right.
Bring them back. I mean, why just drop them in and then leave them? I mean, come on. You didn't
Like they
use them.
pans their way through it or something. Like, what do y'all do?
Exactly. Right.
But I mean, yeah, no, there was absolutely ridiculousness. You would not have believed people would stand in line for toilet paper and fight over toilet paper.
No,
I mean, come on.
It's just, yeah, it's scary. That was
Everybody told us they would be fighting over batteries, right?
I kind of became hyper aware of how often I have to rebuy toilet paper. I was never really thinking about it before, but it's like, wow, even if I had hoarded, I would have run out. You know? It's been a year. All right. So some of you have mentioned that you write comedy. How do you draw comedy into your writing? Is it a conscious choice? What are, like, the little uses of humor that you use as a writer, but beyond, like, big picture scope of I want to write something funny? And how do you balance the comedy with the plot? So this is more for the writers that want to learn how to write comedy. Or not learn how to write comedy, but, you know, understand your process for writing comedy. Maz, do you want to start that one?
So I was actually talking to my husband before I started this, and I was like, I don't know what to tell him because I don't think I'm very funny, but, like, my readers say I'm funny. And he was like, well, where do you get your ideas? I'm like, well, you're funny. So I usually just stick whatever you say into my book. So I guess my biggest advice would be marry somebody funny.
That helps.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is like, as I'm writing, I'll come up with funny ideas. And so I'll have to set it aside, like little bullet points. Like the one I'm writing now, I have a bullet point that said, find an excuse for a dinosaur drag show. So that will happen eventually.
Good. Yes.
Another one is like, make sure when you hack into this PA system, you find the most annoying song possible. So I'm doing my research. And so like doing things like that to where like, I'm a pantser. So as I write, things will come to me anyway. So I'll have to put things aside and then figure out how to wedge them in. And then I'll have to figure out how to organically make it happen or not, because sometimes the funniest things are the things that the characters are on a clear trajectory and everything's going fine. And then the funny situation really just like tips the truck over and is like, hey, you know what I mean? Right. So those are the ones I really enjoyed, where it's like the plot kicks the legs out from under the characters, and now they have to deal with being trapped in a dinosaur amusement park after night, you know, just weird, crazy stuff like that. But yeah, my process is chaotic and trying to make things funny and like shoving them into the story, whether the story wants it to be there or not. And I guess it works. I don't know. I'm bad at this.
Sometimes you just got to lean into it and embrace it and then let it be.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, right.
Just let it be silly.
Embrace the chaos.
Yes.
Chrissy, did you want to talk a little bit?
No, mine is very similar. I just see like articles or something, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. That's gonna go in a book somewhere. Or the cat thing. It might not be a cat. Maybe it's a dinosaur shifter. Or, well, for me, it'd be octopus
tiny
shifter.
dragon.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just. I don't know. Sometimes it's accidental. I don't know if you just all of a sudden they're like in a ridiculous situation and like all of a sudden there's tentacle sex. And I'm like, wait, where did that, how did that happen? Hold on.
Put that on a shirt. I would buy it.
They just literally do something. And I'm like, I didn't tell you to do that. What?
Unexpected tentacle sex.
Yeah, that's, okay. I swear, put that, like make that a merch. I will buy it and wear it.
Good stuff.
Angel, do you have a process?
It's kind of interesting because I didn't always write humor. There are usually humorous things in my stories, not always, but usually. But I wasn't writing humor until I wrote something really depressing. So I wrote a short story, was for a prompt at one point. It's called Prisoner 374215, and it's really depressing because it's about a prisoner of war, and it's very sad, and I needed something after that. I don't want to say as a palate cleanser, but kind of as a mental health break.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I wrote was comedy, was humor, and I generally start with a ridiculous premise, and I think the ridiculous premise is really important. So you have all of these things that get mashed up together, and somebody says, well, why don't you write a space western with demons who have to rescue an angel from a deserted island? And I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Sure.
And it goes from there. Sustaining the humor through a comedy book gets harder, because then you really have to consciously be aware of not losing your characters as characters, not losing the plot as plot, even if it's a funny plot, and still making it funny. So yeah, it's quite a balancing act to not lose that lighter tone to the piece. And sometimes they do better than others.
Did you guys find that your mood really reflects in your writing? Like it's hard to write humor when you're feeling a little bit or down, or
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it has to be really extreme for me. Losing my sense of humor entirely is bad. That means I'm in a very bad place. But losing my mom and then losing my dad, and it's like, no, this is not. I can't do this right now. So there are times when it's not possible.
I discovered because I have friends that make chronic puns. And I remember just like being really super depressed one day, and my friend just kept throwing puns at me, and then suddenly like I was laughing. It's like, I don't know why I'm such a sucker for puns, but it's like it works for me. So
they're punny,
yeah.
But that, to that point, humor is really subjective. And that's something we have to remember also. I mean, something that's funny to me might not be funny to everybody else. If we take a look at Becky Chambers' Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, that's constantly on humor lists, and everybody says it is so funny. I did not find that book funny at all. Did not. And I know that some people do, but it's a very, very subjective thing. So it's not always that your comedic efforts are falling flat, but they might not be as successful for everyone.
Yeah, it's tough being able to. There is no universal joke. Like, there's not going to be something that sticks for everybody. Like,
no matter what Monty Python says.
Exactly. Like, it's impossible. So, I've got friends who will be laughing as hard as I am if we're watching a video of somebody falling down, which my humor scale is like a 12-year-old. If somebody farts or falls down, I'm dead. Like, that's it. So, but I've got friends who will be busting a gut about like a Latin language joke, and I'm like, is it funny? I don't know. So like, there's different backgrounds, different personalities. Like, certain things you're just going to jive with, and other things you're not. So if you're writing humor, you're going to get readers who are like, this is hysterical, and you're going to get other ones like, I accidentally stumbled upon a Goodreads review of this next book coming out, and somebody said they didn't finish it after 10% because they thought I was annoying, and I was like, oh, okay.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
It happens. It's okay.
The 10% reviewers, they always get me, because you can read like 20% of the novel just from the look inside feature. It's like, before you buy that thing, whether you're going
that you didn't like it. Yeah.
And then you still feel the need to leave a review. Like, if you make it 3/4 of the way through the book and it goes off the rails, that's something else. But I don't know. That's a complaint. For me, like, process-wise, I'm just kind of always listening, and I'll write down quotes that people say. And so people will recognize things that they said in my book.
That's funny.
Like, completely out of context. But I was talking with a friend, like, we had posted something about the zombie apocalypse, and she said something about how there are no brains left in America anyway. And that inspired me to write the Starving Zombies Guide to the Apocalypse. And, because I had a zombie apocalypse plan for work that I'd written for work. And so it reads like a government document, but for zombies trying to survive the apocalypse.
That's great.
And
I like that.
It's just like offhand conversations. Like, you said something funny and I ran with it. It's like, ran right out the door with it.
Excellent.
Have you ever taken something that isn't funny and made it funny? Like, in mine, I have, a male who gets pregnant, a human, and it's like, okay, come on, pregnancy is not that funny. It's kind of serious. I'm like, no. You can make it funny.
It can be very funny.
You can make it really funny.
It can be ridiculous.
And still have a good...
It depends on where you put the points of it, because you can focus on the parts that are horrific, like, the woman dies, or you can focus on the parts that are hilarious. It's like, wait, what is this bubbling feeling? Oh, that's what?
Yeah, well, his breasts enlarge because, of course, he's going to have a baby. So, just the ridiculousness of, my boobs hurt. It's like, yeah, because you're pregnant.
Yeah. There was an episode of Charmed where Leo and Piper switched powers and suddenly Leo was the one carrying the baby. And, he starts doing all the complaining that she was doing. And she's like, here, have these crackers, She's like, pats him on the shoulder and goes off to work kind of thing.
You'll be okay.
So, like it's definitely possible to take something painful or serious and make it funny. And
Sure.
that's the magic of true comedic writers and stand-up comedians. And that's part of the power of it, I think. There was a question in the chat, or not in the chat, in the Q&A. What's a scene in one of your books that still makes you laugh out loud? It's hard to think of these things on the spot. But I'll tell you something I used recently in my most recent book. I have an AI named iWoo, which is also the name of one of my coworkers, but it just worked out. But I work with a government computer, and government computers have this terrible, nasty habit of saying, I need to make updates, and then they'll shut down. And you're like, I was just about to log into my very important meeting with the boss of whatever, right? But then it takes 10 minutes to reboot. And it's like, well, what if the computer were in the middle of a meeting, it just got bored and rebooted? And so in my book, there's a point where the AI is just like, oh, sorry, I got bored and rebooted. So, it's one of those things that's funny to me because I remember exactly how I came up with it. But yeah, my other fun thing was when I was writing my murder mystery and I was naming all the characters, I gave them like quirky names. And the grad student is called Dakota Checker because she checks code. It still makes me laugh. Anyone else have an answer to that?
Okay, so the first time I wrote tentacle sex still cracks me up.
I'm glad that we landed back on this. I'm here for it.
No, it's just like there's a scene where they're mates, right? And there's the shifter, and he can be human-ish, or he can be humanish with tentacles, or he can be a full-on octopus. And just they're wrestling in the bed, and they're wrestling for dominance, which is it's ridiculous anyway. But just the humor that is between them, that, like I said, I don't write these books, these characters do. And just the back and forth quips about, oh, you inked in the bed, and they're trying to goad each other. And so like it still cracks me up. If I pick up my book and I'm trying to edit, right? I'm going through it again and going, oh, maybe there's something I want to add, or I end up reading the whole thing again. And I'm like, oh, I forgot to write. Like I'm trying to make a Bible after it's been written. So I'm like, oh, I forgot to write down these points. But yeah, no, that scene right there still cracks me up.
You inked the bed.
You inked in the bed.
That's pretty brilliant.
Fabulous. The one that comes to mind for me, I write a series called Offbeat Crimes. That's it's a paranormal precinct, but all of the officers at this paranormal precinct, their paranormal powers are atypical or broken. So at one point, though, there's a scene in the squad room where someone has tried to bring in a paranormal creature made of ice, and the ice has in the squad room subsequently melted. So one of the officers ends up fighting a puddle of water that keeps hitting back. So that I just find that amusing. So.
Oh my gosh. So the one that comes to mind for mine is, it's actually a little free short story that I wrote last year for like a giveaway thingy. And it's about a guy who summons a demon because he needs a date for a holiday party and he wants to make his ex jealous. So they're there at this party, but like the lady who's hosting the party is kind of like a Wiccan witch kind of thing. So she like has a salt barrier that they have to figure out how to cross, and like all this other crap's happening. But Jag's the demon and Ethan is the human, and there's this moment where they're standing in the kitchen and Jag starts to realize like he's starting to actually develop feelings for this puny little worm human that he has hated this entire time because he's making him do all this stupid human stuff. So they're like, they had a moment where their eyes connected and he's like, Ethan, he's like, yeah, Jag. But then right at that moment is when the host like lights a sage thing. And so the demon has a horrible reaction and just sneezes like immediately into his face. And like he's got snot coming down his nose and his eyes is watering. And he's like, oh my God, what's happening? And everyone else is screaming because he's having such a bad reaction and nobody can figure out what's happening. So like the mood is completely shattered. So it goes from this like almost tender, like, are they gonna kiss moment to this poor hunky guy being like, my eyes, and they have to like run him out of the house. And it's, when I reread it, I thought, is this too gross? Like, is this like, because I really was like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But I was laughing, so I was like, I'm gonna leave it in. So either people are gonna be like, what is wrong with you? Or they're gonna think it's funny. So it's like, that's the line I want to tread, I think.
Yeah, with physical humor, it's hard to get too gross. It's difficult. Yeah.
But also your readers are going in expecting physical humor.
I hope so.
Like if it were just like randomly in the middle of some otherwise serious book, it'd be like, what just happened?
Right.
That's what they expect.
So Scott wants to know, what book of yours should we read for your peak funny?
Okay, so I don't know. Do you want like crazy stuff to happen in space, or do you want it in contemporary? Because I think I have it in both.
Let's do space because we're
it's a
space magic.
You know, it's rainbow space magic. Yeah. Well then, gosh, it just happens all throughout all of my books, really. But I think probably, gosh, I guess the most ridiculous stuff happens in book 2. Gravitational forces. A little bit happen, you know, the pregnancy stuff happens in the last book, but yeah, the most ridiculous stuff happens to Dell probably in book 2.
Maz?
I think I don't have anything that's set in space because my stuff is shifters and stuff.
It could be
rainbow.
It could be rainbow or magic as well.
Okay, so I guess with I would probably say Smash and Grab, the first of my dinosaur shifter series. That's when I really just let my humor just fly through that thing. So it's a lot of ridiculous situations and real high sarcasm and snark and like conflicting personalities and stuff. So that's probably the one, if you're going in trying to really understand my humor, Smash and Grab is a good place to start for sure.
Angel?
I'm probably going to go, I mean, you can't really start with it, but the Brimstone series, which is Demons in Space, and you can't really take it seriously, but I'd say that the second to the last, the 6th book in that series is The Hunt for Red Fluffy. And it is just so silly in places, and there's so many misunderstandings. And, you know, of course, Shax has to have his fluffy wuffy Hellcat, who's like the size of, you know, a Siberian tiger, and it's ridiculous. So that's probably the funniest.
Yeah, and humor is not where I write, it's where I like to read. So the funniest thing I've written is probably in the Alien Invasion 2020 book. And in one of the stories, the aliens has been, you know, trying to fulfill their dream of being part of the circus before their race destroys the whole earth. And so he's just been kind of masquerading as a circus freak. And I like that one because it was one of my younger artists who was 15, and her mom said she was laughing so hard. And so I made a 15-year-old laugh, and that just kind of the peak of what I wanted to achieve last year. So one of the reasons I pose this panel is because I'm kind of tired of being in sci-fi groups and getting recommendations for books that were written before I was born.
Oh,
and I know Angel has a longer, you know, check for that. But I recently got to Audible, and I found this. Well, you started it.
I know I did.
And I found a book called "We'll Save the Galaxy for Food." And it gave me this Douglas Adams kind of vibe with the dry British humor, but it actually had more of a plot, I felt. But it was just so fun to listen to because it was something that whenever I cracked it open, I could smile, and really needed that. So are there books that you really enjoyed recently and want to recommend as we're getting near the end, or books that made you think I need to find more books like this, or books that inspire your own writing? So is there a book recommendation that you want to give to the group for humor that you did?
Yeah, I mean, beyond what things that I've already mentioned, I do want to mention a book by a writer that has unfortunately kind of vanished. It's the Royce Rhee series by Aldous Mercer. And Aldous Mercer, I don't know if anybody remembers them, wrote The Prince and the Program, which was deadly serious and very, very complicated. But Royce Rhee is kind of the other side of that writer. And it's an absolutely ridiculous story. And once again, it's about a secret agent who has to go, and it's called The Emperor's New Clothes. It's, I can't even explain all of it, but the secret agent has to go to a planet and steal their sense of style. So
like that.
yeah, that's, you know, right from the start, it makes no sense. So it's absurdist humor. It's very, very funny. And it just goes, you know, from silly to silly. So I really enjoyed that.
All right. Can you put the title in the chat for people?
Yes.
Maz, do you have something to recommend?
It's not sci-fi, which is a bummer, but like
It can be fantasy, or it could be anything funny.
Okay, so what got me really wanting to write more funny stuff is when I read Alice Winters, which is an MM romance author. She writes a lot of contemporary, but she does have some shifters, like with vampires and things like that. But it's hilarious. Like, I read the first in her Hitman series and cackled. Like, it was the audiobook I listened to when I moved from Texas to Wisconsin. So I was in the car for 2 days and was laughing my butt off the entire way. So if you like contemporary stuff, that's an option, but she does have shifter stuff, which is, if it's anything remotely like her Hitman stuff, brilliant. Love it. Highly recommend.
Very good.
And Chrissy and Maz, can you put the title and author in the chat for people? But Chrissy.
I like reading TJ Klune. And there's quite a few books that are, and I'd have to grab the titles, but yeah, he's got me cracked up like many, many times. But right now, currently, I'm not reading. I'm trying to climb out of a box, so I'll kind of skip that one. But yeah, I mean,
at least you're not climbing out of the toilet with the cat.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
yes.
All right. And okay, cool. And that is our time, people. We can continue this chat in Discord.
I've got to wash a cat.
Poor
Never
cat.
done that. That's funny.
Poor
okay.
cat. Oh gosh.
Poor cat. All right, and thank you everybody for coming. And Angel, check the Q&A. Scott whispered something to you.
Yeah, it's I just want to address that really, really quickly, Scott. That is not a funny book. That's from the Aura series. It is not a funny book. It's the book that makes everyone cry. So stop it.
All right, and on that note, have a great day, everybody, and thank you to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of the con.